Hey friends, welcome to the final episode of the free course Awakening 3D Models. In the previous episode, we explored two super useful, easy, and fast ways to rig a spring, and we picked one of them to rig our character's spring. But in episode 9 of this course, we're gonna do a final check to see if there's any issue with the rig and fix it if needed. We'll also make some adjustments if necessary. And finally, we'll get to know some constraints that are really helpful for limiting the movement of a rigged character. Let's dive in. To check the rig's performance, I start from the top of the hierarchy. I select the base and test it by increasing and decreasing the scale to see how it behaves. As you can see, when we scale the character up, its base moves below the grid, and when we scale it down, the base rises above the grid. But ideally, no matter how we scale the character, its lowest point, the part touching the grid, should always stay right on the grid surface. I press Tab to go into edit mode. If the cursor isn't at the center of the scene, just press Shift-C to snap it there. Then, with Shift-S, move it to the origin point. If you want, you can also move the root here using Shift-S, but it's not necessary. To double-check, I increase the scale again, and we can see that the base works correctly in its place. But if we zoom in and take a closer look at the springs, something strange happens. The scale on the springs isn't uniform. That's because we use the hook modifier, and this modifier creates that limitation. One of the easiest ways to fix this issue is select the spring and go to the Object Constraint tab. Make sure it's the Object Constraint tab. From here, I add a child of constraint. I set the target to Luxo Rig and the bone to base. Perfect. The problem is fixed. I only want it to follow the scale, so I turn off location and rotation. We need to do the same for the top spring as well. Instead of repeating all the steps again, we just need to first select the top spring, and then, while holding Shift, select the bottom spring to make it the active object. Now all we have to do is click here and hit Copy to Selected. As you can see, the constraint has been applied to the top spring as well. Now the issue with both springs is resolved. Now when I increase or decrease the scale, there's no issue anymore. I press Alt-S to reset the scale back to its default value. Okay, let's see if movement works correctly too. As you can see, it works fine along the Y-axis and along the Z-axis. But if I move it along the X-axis, the springs created with the mirror modifier move in the opposite direction. That's because the mirror modifier in Blender behaves differently in this situation. This was the issue I mentioned in the description of the previous episode. Actually, the only goal of this course wasn't to create a perfect rig, but instead to explore common mistakes and fix them together. These are things you'll learn with experience and practice. What I want from you is, don't worry if you face problems like this, there's always a solution. Let's fix it together. First, we need to make a duplicate of this spring and place it on the other side. To start, I select the fork block and go into edit mode. Using L, I select these vertices to place the 3D cursor here, because I want to rotate the spring around this point. I also set the transform orientation to global, and the transform pivot point to 3D cursor. Now I select the spring and remove the mirror modifier from the modifier tab. Then I go into edit mode, select all vertices, and press Shift-D to duplicate them. Next, I press S, then X, and type -1. As you can see, we mirrored the spring manually without using the modifier. Now I press P and separate these vertices, so we have a new spring. I rename this one with a .R at the end for right, and the other one with .L for left. Now I go to the Armature's edit mode, and with Symmetrize, I create the spring bones on the other side. A key point before using Symmetrize is, bones should be named with left and right suffixes, and the separation should be done using a dot, like .R or .L, so Blender can recognize and flip them properly. So I add .L to the end of all these bones. Then I select all these bones, and from the Armature menu, I choose Symmetrize. All the selected bones are now symmetrical on the other side, and their suffix changed from .L to .R. Now all we need to do is go to the modifiers of the new spring, and in the bone fields, replace the existing bones with the ones that have the same name, but with .R at the end. dSpringTop.R dSpringStretch.r, and dSpringBottom.r. Okay, we're going to do the same steps for the top spring. I select the vertices of this pin, then with Shift-S, I bring the cursor to the center of it. I select the spring and remove the mirror modifier from the Modifiers tab. Then I go into Edit mode and select all the vertices. Press Shift-D to duplicate, then S, X, and type -1 to mirror it manually. And finally, I press P and separate it. Perfect. I add .R to this one and .L to that one. Now I select the armature and go into Edit mode. First, I add .L to the end of all these bone names. Yep, that's done. I select these bones. From the Armature tab, I apply Symmetrize. Great. Now all I need to do is go to the spring modifier and replace the bones with the ones that have the .R suffix. And that's it. For testing, I set the transform mode back to active element. And as you can see, it's working perfectly in all directions. That's done. All right, let's move on to the rest. The root bone is supposed to handle rotation. It's doing the job, but it's better to set this to Euler, so it rotates based on degrees. Perfect. I want the base geo and linkage geo to follow when I move the linkage upward. To do that, I'm going to use an object constraint for both of them. I add a copy location to this. I set the target to Luxo Rig, and in this field, I pick linkage. Now to figure out which axis I need, I change the orientation mode to local. As you can see in linkage, the y-axis is pointing up, but for base geo, it's different. So I only enable y here. I tick offset to keep the distance between them. In this section, I set the target space to local space, and for the owner, which is base geo, I set it to custom space. Then choose Luxo Rig and linkage. Now, if I move the linkage upward, the base moves along with it. We need to do the same process for the linkage geo as well, but we've already learned a faster way. First, I select the linkage and then the base. And from here, I choose the copy to selected option. And that's it, super easy. Now, from the Object Data tab of the Armature, I enable Shapes so I can make changes to the custom shapes. We need to make a small change to this shape. So I unhide the custom shapes. Okay. I select this and temporarily set its depth to 0. I make a duplicate of it. Then I go to Edit mode and select these points. I hit Separate and Delete in the Object mode. I bring the cursor here, go into Edit mode, and select all the points. I set the Transform mode to 3D cursor. I duplicate it again, rotating it 90 degrees around the Z-axis, and repeat this until the circle is complete. I also give it a little depth, and that's it. Since we're creating a controller, there's no need to worry about merging the points. It won't cause any issues. Now I move on to this one. First, I press Shift-S to bring the cursor here. I enter Edit mode, select these points, hit P, and separate. I switch to Object mode and delete it. Then go back to Edit mode, select all points, and duplicate it, rotating it 90 degrees around the Z-axis until the circle is complete. I give it a little more depth. Perfect. I name this one Linkage. Since a custom shape with this name already exists, it automatically adds the suffix. I delete the old linkage shape and rename this one again. Okay. Rename this one to Root. Excellent. I also rename this collection to Custom Shapes, then hide it again. Now I go to the Armature. Select Linkage, and in the Bone tab, I assign CS Linkage to it. I rotate it -90 degrees around the X-axis, and slightly increase its scale. Also, for the root, I select CS root, that's all. In the Data tab, I assign linkage to controller's collection. After that, I turn off all bones, so I only see the controllers. Then I can select these, and assign them to all bones. Great. I congratulate everyone. The rigging of our character is complete, and everything that needed to be applied to the character has been done. Before continuing, huge thanks to everyone supporting us this month. Special shout out to Eric Britannia for helping us keep these tutorials free. We couldn't do this without you. If you want to support, join us at patreon.com/MiM-Repository. Thanks for watching. Let's continue. There may only be some adjustments made based on our different expectations for the character. For example, creating movement limits for the bones is something we'll do based on our expectations for the character in coordination with the animator. Let me point out a few examples of these limits as the final note for this course. As you know, root is only supposed to rotate the character around the y-axis, so we don't need any other transforms. That's why I lock everything except Y rotation. Linkage should only move along the y-axis, so I lock the rest of its transforms as well. For the pole target, I leave only the X location unlocked. For the IK controller, I lock both its rotation and scale. And for this one, I lock all transforms, as it will be controlled by the custom properties we created. Very well, this is one type of limitation. Another type of limitation is the use of the constraints available in the constraints section. For example, for the IK controller, we can create a limit distance and define the point of limitation. In this case, I'm setting linkage as the target. In the distance field, I need to specify the minimum or maximum distance from the linkage. Why minimum or maximum? Because of this option. If we imagine a circle with the radius being the distance, inside allows movement within the circle and prevents exiting it, while outside works the opposite, allowing movement outside the circle but preventing entry. And on surface allows movement only on the surface of the circle. Let me show you. I'll set it to inside. To find the distance value, all I need to do is deactivate the constraint, set the distance to 0, and move the bone until I want to allow this bone to move away from the linkage. This looks good. Now when I activate the constraint, Blender automatically detects the distance and applies it here. As you can see, the constraint is applied, and the IK is now restricted from moving farther than the specified distance. Now I'll create a duplicate of this and deactivate it. In this section, I'll select outside. I'll lower the IK until I want to allow it to get closer to the linkage. This point looks good. I'll set the distance to 0 and activate the constraint. Now, we can see that the IK is limited between these two distances. These constraints are very useful and necessary, and they are applied to the rig based on our project needs. The other limits work in the same way, and you can use them as needed. For example, if I create a limit location for the pole target, I can control its minimum and maximum movement in different directions. For instance, I'll set the X minimum to -4 and the maximum to 4. Now we can see that its movement is restricted, and it can't move beyond 4 or -4. Well, another useful constraint is the floor. For IK, I'll create a floor. I'll set the target to Luxo Rig and the bone to base. Now, if we go to the side view, we can see that the IK can't penetrate below the base and is stopped just like hitting a solid ground surface. That's it for this one. I'll bring this custom shape to the 0 point and raise this one a little higher. Perfect. And that's the completion of the Luxo Rig project. I hope this course has been useful to you and met your expectations. Stay tuned for our upcoming courses, and thank you for your support. Your support gives us the energy to create more free educational content for you. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions. They really help us make better videos for everyone starting out on this exciting journey. So don't forget to leave a comment below and stay tuned for more. We'll get back to you as quickly as possible. And finally, You can download the final project for this course from Artstation or Gumroad. And if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask in our Discord group. The link's in the description. Thank you for watching and have a good time.